No warning, no robbery, just cold, calculated execution outside a Texas courthouse. But when two more bodies turned up just months later, investigators realized this wasn't an isolated attack. It was just the beginning of something far darker. It started with 5 gunshots in broad daylight. A normal Thursday morning in Kaufman County instantly became something out of a crime thriller. Assistant District Attorney Mark Hasse had just stepped out of his car, walking toward the courthouse like he always did. But this time, someone was waiting for him. Dressed in all black, face covered, the man calmly walked up, exchanged a few words, and then pulled the trigger. No hesitation, no panic, just cold, calculated murder. Mark was hit multiple times. Witnesses nearby heard the final shot echo off the street, the one that ended it all. A bullet to the side of his head. He collapsed in a pool of blood, just steps away from justice. He never made it to the courtroom, and the shooter vanished. This wasn't some chaotic drive-by or street fight gone wrong. This was an execution. In the middle of the day, feet from the courthouse. The killer didn't even leave behind shell casings. Witnesses couldn't catch the license plate because there wasn't one. Even the getaway car, a light gray or silver sedan, was scrubbed clean. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Mark Hasse wasn't just any prosecutor. He was the guy who went after the worst of the worst. Members of the Aryan Brotherhood, drug traffickers, gang leaders. He made enemies for a living. And that morning, one of those enemies got even. He was known for being smart, relentless, and fearless in court. But outside the courtroom, he had a goofy side. He wore bright, ridiculous sweaters just to make coworkers laugh. He was respected, loved, and loyal to a fault. Mark's entire life was about putting dangerous people behind bars. And now someone had come out of the shadows and flipped the script, putting him down in the most public, brutal way possible. There was yelling before the shots rang out. One witness said Mark kept shouting, I'm sorry, again and again. Another saw what looked like a quick scuffle, a brief exchange before the shots. But no one saw it coming. And no one could explain why a man as prepared as Mark, who usually carried a gun, didn't stand a chance. His weapon was under his coat. He never even reached for it. This is just one story. There are countless others. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. This wasn't just murder. This was a message. A hit that felt more like something from a cartel or organized crime syndicate, not small-town Texas. The kind of crime that forces everyone to look over their shoulder. And the fear that followed? It didn't stop with Mark's death. Because if someone could take out a prosecutor in broad daylight, right outside the courthouse, who else was on the list? Mark's caseload was huge, filled with violent offenders and people with a reason to hate him. But what made investigators uneasy wasn't just who he prosecuted. It was how this was done. Quiet, quick, clean, professional. And it was done with the confidence of someone who knew he'd never be caught. As police scrambled to piece together the crime scene, one thing became crystal clear. This wasn't over. Just when the town started to breathe again, the nightmare came back, twice as brutal. 2 months after Mark Hasse was gunned down outside the courthouse, District Attorney Mike McClelland and his wife Cynthia were found slaughtered inside their own home. Not on the street, not in public, inside their sanctuary. Shot multiple times. Mike hit 16 times, Cynthia 4. This wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. Mike wasn't just Mark's boss. He was his mentor, his closest friend. And now he and his wife were both gone, ambushed in what should have been the safest place in their world. Their family had been planning an Easter weekend together. Cynthia had been baking. There was food on the table. But when loved ones couldn't get a response, someone checked the house and walked straight into carnage. There were no signs of forced entry, which raised the most disturbing question of all. Did Mike know his killer? Did he open that door believing he was safe, only to be betrayed by someone he trusted? Even more chilling, the killer had only stayed inside for 2 minutes. 2 minutes to end 2 lives. To walk in, execute, and disappear. That's how fast it happened. Surveillance cameras showed a white car cruising the neighborhood around the time of the attack. Not the same car spotted when Mark was killed, but close. Same vague color, same careful timing. And this time, the killer had slipped up. They left shell casings. They left footage. And they left the community in complete terror. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. Prosecutors were being picked off, one by one, systematically. This was a war, and someone had declared it. But what happened next turned this case from horrifying to straight up twisted. It didn't take long before the rumors started, and they were dark. With 2 prosecutors executed in cold blood, investigators immediately turned toward the most dangerous people Mark and Mike had ever crossed. These weren't low-level criminals. These were violent, organized, and deeply connected groups. People with power, money, and a long memory for grudges. The Aryan Brotherhood was at the top of that list, a violent, white supremacist gang with a known hatred for law enforcement. Just months earlier, over 30 of their members had been indicted, and Kaufman County had played a big part in that. Suddenly, it wasn't crazy to think this was a full-blown retaliation. But they weren't the only ones on the radar. Mexican drug cartels also had history with Mike and Mark. And if anyone knows how to send a message through violence, it's them. Both men had taken on cases involving major drug operations, meth labs, trafficking rings, and cartel-connected dealers. That kind of work doesn't just go away quietly, especially not when convictions are handed down. So when the DEA and his wife were found gunned down in their living room, everyone started whispering the same thing. This is cartel written all over it. Cold, fast, professional, like a hit ordered from miles away, carried out by someone who didn't blink twice. News of the murders spread fast, and fear spread even faster.
Saturday night with breaking news. Kaufman County District Attorney Mike McClelland and his wife have been found shot to death inside their home, and sources are telling News 8 tonight this does not appear to be a murder-suicide. The stunning news comes just 2 months after the murder of Kaufman County Assistant District Attorney.
Officials were calling the FBI. Local police were stretched thin. Even the governor's office was getting involved. If this was gang-related, then Kaufman County was sitting on a ticking time bomb. And it didn't help that the killings looked almost too polished, like the kind of thing only trained, ruthless criminals could pull off. But that wasn't the whole story. Because while everyone was looking at gangs and cartels, the real killer was watching. And he was closer than anyone realized. While the world searched for gang ties and cartel links, the real monster was hiding in plain sight. Eric Williams wasn't some shadowy criminal hiding out in another country. He was a former justice of the peace, a man who once shook hands with the very prosecutors he would later target. And what was his fall from grace over? 3 stolen computer monitors. That's it. It sounds petty, almost laughable, until you realize how far Eric was willing to go just to get even. Mark Hasse had prosecuted him. Mike McClelland had backed that case. Together, they stripped Eric of his career, his law license, and his reputation. But instead of walking away with the slap on the wrist he got, just probation, Eric let it fester. He wasn't satisfied with revenge in court. He wanted it in blood. When Mark was killed, Mike himself had actually named Eric Williams as someone worth checking into. But when police showed up, they found him wearing a sling and claiming to be injured. No gunshot residue, no evidence. So they let him go. That was their first mistake. But behind the scenes, Eric was already spinning his plan like a spider building a web. Investigators later found his computer history filled with searches, license plates, home addresses, even surveillance on the very people who were now dead. He wasn't just obsessed, he was stalking them like prey. What's worse, Eric had the nerve to act shocked when the murders happened. He gave interviews, expressed sympathy, said his heart went out to the victims' families. But that's how he played it, smooth, manipulative, controlled, like a man who thought he was 10 steps ahead of everyone. And for a while, he was. But when police looked closer, the cracks in his fake innocence started to split wide open. When investigators cracked open Eric Williams' storage unit, they weren't prepared for what was inside. It wasn't just suspicious, it was horrifying. Inside, police uncovered a full-blown arsenal. Guns, ammunition, bulletproof vests, fake badges, military-style uniforms. But that was just the beginning. Sitting near the back, behind boxes and gear, was the getaway car. The very same white sedan seen driving near the McClelland's home around the time of the murders. Its plates were fake, the seats were wiped clean, and inside the trunk, more weapons were stashed, ready for use. And then came the most disturbing find of all, a pickle jar filled with a homemade explosive mixture, napalm. Not just guns and bullets, explosives, the kind of thing you only hear about in war zones or terrorist plots. This wasn't a man thinking rationally. This was a full-blown revenge fantasy, built in steel and gunpowder. But the physical evidence wasn't the only thing that sealed his fate. On Eric's computer, detectives found an avalanche of digital breadcrumbs. Search history that screamed premeditation. He had looked up the daily routines of Mark and Mike. He mapped out their neighborhoods. He even tracked the license plates of not only his targets, but their neighbors. He wanted to know who was coming, who was watching, and how to disappear without a trace. These weren't casual clicks. This was surgical stalking. There was also a handwritten note matching the language used in the anonymous emails sent to law enforcement. Those same emails had taunted police, demanding a judge step down or else more blood would be spilled. He knew the details of the murders. He referenced ammo types and entry points no one else knew. Police now had a real problem on their hands. Not just a killer, but a manipulator. A man who wanted to control the investigation from the shadows. Even the receipts told a story. One led them to a white car purchased under the name Richard Green, a fake identity tied back to Eric. Another revealed the purchase of specific weapons and tactical gear. It was like a paper trail he thought he could bury, but it just kept pointing back to him. And still, through all of this, Eric played innocent. He cooperated just enough to stall, gave interviews, feigned shock, spoke like a concerned citizen. But behind that calm exterior, he was unraveling. The truth was becoming too loud to ignore. And that's when someone else finally came forward. Someone who had been by his side the entire time. And what she confessed changed everything. The killer's accomplice wasn't some hired gun or criminal mastermind. It was his wife, Kim Williams, quiet, withdrawn, known mostly for her health issues and staying home, cracked under pressure. During questioning, she broke down completely. Tears turned into confessions. And what she revealed shocked even the investigators sitting across from her. She wasn't just a witness. She was the getaway driver, the planner, the backup. She admitted to being involved in all 3 murders. Mark Hasse, Mike McClelland, Cynthia McClelland. Every life taken was a step-by-step plan she helped execute. Why? Because she was just as angry, just as bitter, just as twisted. She told detectives that Eric had been planning revenge for months, ever since his conviction for stealing computer monitors. In her own words, he couldn't let it go. He believed Mark and Mike ruined his life, and he wanted everyone involved to pay. Kim, she agreed. She hated them too. She believed her husband had been humiliated, and she was more than willing to help him strike back. And her details lined up perfectly. She described how Eric dressed like a SWAT officer to trick Mike McClelland into opening the door. He claimed there was an active shooter in the area, and Mike, believing he was being protected, let his killer walk right inside. Seconds later, both he and Cynthia were dead. Kim waited outside in the car the whole time, high on a cocktail of pain pills and sedatives, nodding off between bursts of adrenaline. She admitted that she'd been using Oxy, Valium, and morphine daily. She said the drugs made it easier to go along with the plan.
I was so drugged up, and I so believed in Eric and everything that he told me. His anger was my anger.
They dulled her guilt, numbed her thoughts. In her words, I was so drugged up I couldn't think straight. But that didn't stop her from driving the car, helping with the cleanup, and watching the people they hated die. Kim also explained why Eric wore a mesh mask during Mark Hasse's murder.
And ask you if you recognize that.
Yes.
What is that?
That's the mask he wore.
How do you know?
I recognize it.
He didn't just want to hide. He wanted Mark to know exactly who was about to take his life. That's why he left it partially see-through. A final, twisted face-to-face moment before pulling the trigger. She even pointed investigators toward Lake Tawakoni, claiming Eric had dumped more weapons and gear into the water. And sure enough, police recovered a bag filled with guns, ammo, and the exact mesh mask he wore during the first killing. This wasn't some crime of passion. It was cold-blooded, rehearsed, and fueled by entitlement. Eric didn't just want revenge. He wanted the world to fear him. And Kim helped him every step of the way. But this time, her loyalty came with a price. Because what she said next, about who Eric planned to kill next, took this entire case to an even darker place. Eric Williams didn't break into the McClellan's home. He was let in. According to Kim, Eric dressed head to toe like a SWAT officer. Uniform, gear, badge. He knew exactly how to play the role. And in the middle of an ongoing investigation, where prosecutors were already being murdered, that disguise was the perfect weapon. He knocked on the McClellan's door, pretending there was an emergency, claimed there was a shooter in the neighborhood, claimed they were in danger, and Mike, who was already living in fear, believed him. He trusted the uniform. He thought help had arrived, but what walked through that door wasn't help. It was death. Within seconds of being welcomed inside, Eric pulled out an AR-15 and unleashed chaos. Mike was gunned down in the entryway. Cynthia, just a few steps away in the living room, never had a chance. She was shot multiple times. It was brutal, fast, merciless. And just like that, 2 lives were erased in less than 2 minutes. No forced entry, no struggle, just pure manipulation. Eric knew exactly how to use fear as a key. He understood how people think, how they panic, and how to twist that into an opportunity. That wasn't just evil, it was calculated. And while he played hero at the front door, his wife Kim sat outside in the car, high on pills, waiting for her husband to finish what they both knew was about to happen. She didn't call for help. She didn't stop him. She just drove. But what came next proved that Mike and Cynthia weren't the final targets. Because Eric wasn't finished, not even close. He thought he was too smart to get caught, but the jury thought otherwise. Eric Williams was tried separately for each of the murders, starting with Cynthia McClelland. Prosecutors didn't need his DNA. They didn't need fingerprints. What they had was even more powerful, a mountain of circumstantial evidence, and the voice of someone who had been by his side the entire time.
But you don't mind us going down there and looking? I'll take that.
His own wife. Kim Williams took the stand and didn't hold back. She walked the jury through every twisted detail, how Eric planned the murders, manipulated his way into homes, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Her confession made it clear, this wasn't a man acting in the heat of the moment. This was a man who chose murder, step by step, bullet by bullet. Eric's defense tried to play it off as coincidence, said the emails could have been typed by anyone, said Kim was just angry and out for revenge. But the jury didn't buy it, not for a second, because every piece of this story, every weapon, every search, every disguise, pointed right back to him. The mask, the car, the storage unit, the digital footprint. It was a perfect storm of evidence. And the final blow? Eric sat in court with a smirk on his face. Smug, arrogant, like he still believed he was in control. But the jury saw through it. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict came down, guilty of capital murder. When it came time for sentencing, prosecutors wanted one thing, death. And Kim Williams was the final nail. She told the court exactly what kind of man her husband was. Cold, calculated, dangerous. Her words hit like gunfire.
He told me that he had to shoot her an extra time because she was still moaning.
And when the sentence was read out loud, there was no shock, no tears, just silence. Eric Williams was sent to death row. But that wasn't the end of his story, because even from his prison cell, he kept trying to claw his way back into the spotlight. Kim Williams helped plan 3 murders and still avoided the death penalty. After spilling every detail of her husband's plan, Kim struck a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for her full cooperation, she accepted a plea bargain, 40 years in prison, with a chance at parole in 2034. That means if she behaves, she could walk free less than 2 decades after helping erase 3 lives. She didn't get this deal because she deserved mercy. She got it because she was useful. Her testimony made the jury see exactly what Eric was capable of. But let's be clear, Kim wasn't some innocent bystander. She drove the car. She knew the plan. And she admitted she wanted revenge too. Her excuses? A blur of pills, poor judgment, and loyalty to a bitter man with a grudge. But her own words sealed the truth. She was happy it happened. She said hearing the shots made her feel like justice had finally been served, not by the system, but by them. After sentencing, she filed for divorce, as if that erased everything.
One day after she was indicted, Kim Williams filed for divorce. She says she believes her husband had a plan to kill her and himself when he was done taking out all the people on his hit list. Eric Williams appealed his conviction. That appeal has been denied.
As if cutting ties from Eric Williams could undo what she helped him do. And while Eric waits on death row, Kim sits in a prison cell, far away from public view. But don't forget, she was just as dangerous, just as responsible. And if not for her confession, the justice system may have never caught up to either of them. But even now, with her behind bars, one question still lingers. What if she walks free someday? He could have walked away with a slap on the wrist, but instead, he chose murder. Eric Williams wasn't facing decades behind bars. He wasn't being dragged through the dirt. He was convicted of stealing 3 computer monitors, a petty, embarrassing mistake that cost him his job and law license. That's it. No prison time, just probation. But that bruised ego? It turned into rage. And that rage turned into a cold, calculated killing spree. Instead of rebuilding his life, Eric burned it all to the ground. He could have taken the punishment and moved on, found a new career, proved everyone wrong. But instead, he became obsessed with revenge. And his answer to humiliation? 3 dead bodies. A respected prosecutor, a district attorney, an innocent wife caught in the crossfire. He destroyed families, shattered a community, and dragged his own wife into his mess. All because he couldn't handle the consequences of his own actions. And what did it get him? A cell on death row, a courtroom full of people who wanted him erased, and a legacy that's now defined by one word: coward. Not just for what he did, but for why he did it. He wasn't fighting injustice. He wasn't making a point. He was just a man who couldn't take responsibility for getting caught. Now he spends his days behind bars, filing appeal after appeal, begging the same justice system he tried to destroy to save him. The same courtroom he once stood in with power and pride now holds the key to his fate. Eric Williams didn't just lose his freedom. He lost everything, and all over something he could have walked away from with a shred of dignity. Eric Williams wanted control, respect, and revenge. But in the end, all he got was a prison jumpsuit and a legacy of destruction. His victims were people who stood for justice. He couldn't beat them in court, so he tried to silence them with bullets. And now, he'll spend the rest of his life waiting for the justice he so desperately tried to escape. Let this case be a reminder. One man's bitterness can become another family's heartbreak. With that said, thanks for watching. And if stories like this leave you speechless, make sure to subscribe for more true crime that digs deeper than the headlines. Hit the bell so you never miss what the mainstream forgets to tell you. Until next time.